r/nosleep. Posted by u/Jgrupe. Check out author's novel, Beneath the Asylum. Link in description. I'm an elevator repairman. Rule number 4, don't try to save yourself. Part 3. After Pete rescued me from being crushed by the elevator, we became close. He eventually started to refer to me as his protege, and I felt like that was an apt word for our semi-professional friendship. Most of the lessons I learned were from him, and they saved my life on more than one occasion. When he was visiting me in the hospital after I broke both my ankles falling down the elevator shaft, he regaled me with tales from his own experiences of elevator repair hell. Back in the 70s, safety regulations were even more lax, so he had quite a few brushes with death. It was my third night in the trauma unit and I had had one of several surgical procedures earlier that day. They put a series of pins and small steel rods into my legs. I had broken my distal tibia and fibula, the doctors told me, and had I ended up with what they referred to as compound fractures where the bones break completely and stab through the skin. I had 4 of those fractures, 2 on each side. It looked pretty gnarly before I finally got fixed up. I had come out of the haze of anesthesia and Pete decided he would tell me a story to try to cheer me up. His thinking was it might brighten my day to hear about his own experience that had been debatably even worse than mine. It didn't help, in fact, just made me have more intense and terrifying opioid-fueled nightmares. But it was a nice thought. Okay, kid, I'll tell you a good tip to remember while you're out there. If you're ever stuck in an elevator, stay put. He looked at me and winked, with a little grin on his face. That's it? I asked, still groggy from the medication. How come? Is this a good enough reason for you? He asked, lifting up his pant leg, to reveal a wooden fake leg. Whoa. What the hell happened to it? Well, back when I was younger, about your age, I got stuck inside a box in an old mental hospital on the weekend. There was nobody around and the security guards were new, I guess, and didn't know what they were doing, so they just silenced the emergency call button, thinking it was malfunctioning. Thinking that the whole elevator was on the fritz. They didn't realize I was stuck inside. I tried calling for help but nobody answered. I screamed and screamed for hours and then ended up in there all night, then the next day, then another night. By Sunday I was losing my mind. I was thirsty, starving, afraid nobody was going to come for me. So I tried to pry open the doors. I managed to get them open and saw I was just below the basement. The box had stalled on the way up and I realized I could pull myself up then get down on my belly and crawl out of there. But I was worried because I knew this was dangerous. If the box decided to move at exactly that moment I could easily die, be severed right in half. That happens more often than you could possibly imagine. I decided to take the risk. I had been stuck in there for so long I was terrified I would die there. Thinking back I should have just stayed put, but try telling that to a young man in his 20s who has his life ahead of him and thinks he's invincible. I told myself that box wasn't going to move at exactly that moment. There was no chance of it. But I was wrong. Just then, as it happened, another guy from my company had been sent over to check on the elevator. Whatever he did, it got things moving again, just as my midsection was crossing the threshold to the other side. I had only an instant to react, and I did. I pulled out my waist and my right leg as quick as I could, reflexively, since I was terrified of that happening. It didn't take much effort on my part. But my other leg wasn't as lucky, as you see here. Holy shit. Yeah, holy shit is right. The elevator ceiling came down on it and it didn't just break, it pulled me in. I felt myself being sucked into the elevator as it went down, taking me with it. I dug my nails into the linoleum floor and howled in pain until it finally ripped my leg clean off, pulled it out like a drumstick from a turkey dinner. He clicked his tongue and mimed this. I ended up on the same floor we're on right now, in a hospital bed that looked a bit like the one you're sitting in right now. At least you'll get to keep your legs. A frowning nurse walked in wearing a set of colorless green scrubs and carrying a small plastic cup full of pills and a needle in her hands. She set these items down on my bedside table wordlessly and pumped some liquid hand sanitizer on her hands from a nearby dispenser. Visiting hours are over now, she said to Pete. Her eyes were cold and compassionless. Sure. He got up to leave. He gathered his coat and something fell out onto the bed. I didn't notice it at first, and didn't realize it had happened until after he left. The nurse gave me my pills and a blood thinner injection that left an irritating bee-sting feeling that didn't go away for several hours. Once she was gone I noticed the object sitting on the bed beside me. It was a small golden pin, with the initials SUERM on it. At first I thought it said sperm and giggled a little bit, but then realized I was still just crazy high from the epidural and my last dose of 4-morphine. I read it again and tried to figure out what it meant. I would need to ask Pete about it later, I thought. Then the nurse came back in. "Oh, by the way, I forgot, your family called, your dog just died." She walked away without another word, and that was the last I saw of her for the rest of the night, despite my terrible pain and ringing the call bell for hours on end. I was told the next morning the system had gone out and they had been doing hourly rounds, but I hadn't seen anyone. The rest of the stay in that place wasn't much better, but I won't bore you with the details of my hospital-acquired infections and eventual dependence on opioids that resulted from my time there. And from my botched surgeries there. This fucking city, I'll tell you. Even the hospital is a shithole. For the rest of my time in that place, though, I stared at that pin. I couldn't help but wonder what those initials meant. I finally got my walking papers after weeks of physio and OT. It took me a lot longer than that to even begin to feel normal again. I asked Pete about the pin after my discharge and he reluctantly told me another tip. About a society that meets only twice a year. I was astounded at what he told me. I listened and nodded hesitantly when he asked if I was interested in perhaps joining. He described something that I would only later believe to be true once I had seen it with my own eyes. The Society of Untainted Elevator Repairmen. The last line of defense between hell and earth. Rule 5 of this series. I'm an elevator repairman. Rule number 5, don't ride with the devil. After Pete told me about SUERM and everything it stood for, I was flabbergasted. He said they were the last line of defense between hell and earth. What that meant, I had no idea. I would find out later on all about the secret battle between good and evil that was raging between heaven and hell, earth caught in the middle, the elevators being the only mode of transportation between all three. Not all elevators, of course. Only a chosen few. Some are one-way only. Hellevators, for instance, those are a ride straight to the dark place itself. Then there are the ones that go up. But a rare few can go between all of them. SUERM made sure that none of the boxes were overridden, and that no elevators operated without authorization from all three parties involved. We were the representatives of Earth, and kept up the maintenance of the boxes as part of our end of the bargain, Pete told me. See, once upon a time, it was realized that the big guy upstairs needed to talk to the pointy-horned dude down below every once in a while. Don't ask me why, but there's definitely proof of it in the book. Remember Job? Lucifer was up in heaven just walking around, and walked up to God, and said, "Hey, God, your pal Job wouldn't like you so much if you burned his fucking house down and killed his family, now would he?" The point is, how do you think the devil got up there? Stairs would have taken forever. He definitely took an elevator. Anyways, the reason I'm telling you all of this is that I think one of those elevators that goes between all three realms might actually be in my own apartment building. It's a rickety old thing, and unassuming, which makes it all the more likely to me. Ever see Indiana Jones and the Quest for the Holy Grail? Then you'll see what I'm saying here. The dirty 1940s era elevator is a perfect disguise for something far more grand and complex. And besides, that would explain what happened the other night. It was about 3:30 in the morning and I was waiting for the elevator with the laundry basket clutched precariously in my arms. The door rattled across the steel track and opened to reveal a thin man in a white three-piece suit and a hat, holding a polished walking stick, and looking like someone from a different era entirely. He smiled at me with his thin lips and waved me into the box. His eyes looked black with not a hint of color in them. I noticed as the door closed behind me, a shiver running down my spine. He never broke eye contact, just stared at me as if looking straight through me. I broke into a cold sweat as his grin grew wider. Laundry day? Haha, you know it, I tried to pretend everything was okay, knowing it wasn't. Gotta make a quick stop first, hope you don't mind. Won't be long. He poked the steel panel below the elevator buttons with his walking stick and it popped open revealing a secret compartment. Inside it was an additional button, which set on its lowest level. What the hell? Oh, that's exactly right, young man. I'll pop down to my humble abode and then you can come back up and do your laundry. On the way down we can discuss a little business proposition. I looked at him, terrified, realizing with dawning apprehension who this man in the crisp white suit really was. You can't be serious, the words fell out of my mouth and I closed it before I could say anything else that might offend this thing. I am quite serious, in fact. Now I know you have your oaths and your list of rules with SUERM and all of that, but I just want you to consider for a second, just for a second, how good it would feel to have unlimited money. Not only that, but everything that comes along with it. You know chicks dig guys with cash, right? You want a girl? You want a guy? Come on, man, you can't say no to that. I mean even Bill fucking Gates doesn't have unlimited money for Christ's sake. All you have to do, is sign this. He was holding out a very lengthy contract with the tiniest print I had ever seen in his hand with a fountain pen in the other. Its ink was dripping dark crimson red on the floor of the elevator. Sign it. I gulped down nothing but dryness and said, no. His anger was immediate, his wrath terrifying. You know who you're fucking dealing with here, shit for brains? I can annihilate you right now and nobody would even know you were gone. I can erase you from the face of the earth so there's no memory of you ever having existed at all. Even your parents won't remember you. So let me ask you again, do you want to sign it? Be my repairman. You know you want to. It's either that or pain. As I shook my head one last time, too numb to speak, I dropped my laundry basket and began to rise up into the air, defying gravity. He held up his hand and made clawing motions downward, and I felt the skin peel off of my face in long strips. I screamed and he did it again, and again. I howled in pain and twisted away from him to no avail. Will you sign it now? No. My eyes suddenly felt like they were on fire. They began to pour blood and I wanted so badly to scratch them out of my head. My blood felt like it was boiling in my veins. My breath felt like fire with each agonizing inhalation. Every part of my body was suddenly made of pain. My arms and legs, chest and abdomen, everything was agony like it was being seared with a brand that would leave a lifelong scar. Sign it. Never. Ding. Very well, he said, as the elevator door opened. It slid to the side to reveal absolute darkness, without sound or smell. Maybe next time. He tipped his hat to me and stepped into the void, disappearing instantly. I fell down and landed in my dirty clothes, which thankfully broke my fall. My hand went up to my face to feel the damage there and felt the skin was intact. It was all just a vision the bastard had conjured up to fool me. He had left me unscathed, but utterly terrified. I'm taking the fucking stairs in my apartment for the rest of the time I live there. I don't care what anybody says. You guys can take the elevator. I'll walk.